All right, kia ora everybody, and welcome to this session on Tier 3 and 4 charity reporting. Is it working? So I'm Rochelle Stewart-Allen. I'm the Pokairahi General Manager for Huia Community Aotearoa. We are a peak body working nationally across the tangata whenua community and voluntary sector with a focus in a lot of bridge building, really, both within the community sector itself and across other areas like government, funders, and business. So we're based here in Te Whanganui Atara in Wellington. Good to see a bit of sun happening today. We're really pleased to welcome the XRB External Reporting team partnering with us on this session. So we will, I'll start with a karakia and then I'll tell you a little bit about how the session's going to work. Let's get to the right page. Ki tau nā manakitanga a te mea naro, ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia mahia te huia mā kihikihi. Kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te araha, toi te reo Māori. Kia tūturu, ka whakamaua, kia tēnā huie tākie. So kia ora everybody. So how we're going to run today's session is we are going to, firstly, I'm going to hand over to Jamie Cottrell from XRB, External Reporting Board. He's going to tell you a little bit about who they are and what they're about, if you don't already know. Then he's going to talk about the current survey that's underway to look at the Tier 3 and Tier 4 charity reporting, which has been going, the new reporting standards have been operating for about 5 years. So he's going to tell you a little bit about why they're reviewing them now and where they're at in that process. Then we're going to have Cherrie Yang from AUT, who's going to talk a little bit about her experience investigating this kind of reporting and why it's important, and then we're going to turn it over to you. So we're going to seek your feedback on what's working, what isn't, what you'd like to see change, where are the gaps. Along the way, you can add your comments into the chat box. So we'll have about half an hour of the initial chatting, and then we turn over and I'll work with you on your feedback and opportunity to speak. So the first place to get started is the chat box, if you've got any feedback that you'd like to specifically put in there. And then we will finish up at 1 o'clock. After that, if you have time and you'd like to stay, you're welcome to for an extra half an hour, which we usually add on at the end if people want to do more peer-to-peer meeting, meet some of your other peers who are on the session and might be interested to just make some new connections and links around the country. We find that this works really well on sessions like this. You have a particular topic and you get to the end of it, and then it's really nice to be able to actually have a bit of space for those who can stay on. So once we finish up at the end, I'll finish up with a karakia mūtanga, and then you can sign out, or if you're welcome to stay on, and we'll just split you into groups and you can chat amongst yourselves. So now I'm going to hand over to Jamie.
All right. Thanks, Rochelle. Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much for joining us today for this feedback session on the review of the Tier 3 and Tier 4 standards. I also want to say a big thank you to Huia for making this event possible. As Rochelle mentioned, my name is Jamie Cottrell, and I'm a project manager at the External Reporting Board in the Accounting Standards team working on this review. And I'm joined today by Lisa Kelsey, who is a senior project manager working on this review with me. The objective that we set out for today was for me to talk for a little bit and give you a bit of background on who we are, the XRB, the Tier 3 and 4 standards, and the review, after which, as Rochelle said, we'll be opening up to get some of your feedback. So to that first question, the first thing I want to do is answer the question about who are the External Reporting Board, or the EXRB, at least as far as it relates to reporting by registered charities. We are an independent Crown entity, and we are responsible for developing and issuing New Zealand's financial reporting, auditing, assurance, and ethical standards. And this includes the Tier 3 standards that registered charities use when preparing performance reports that they file annually with Charity Services. It's important to point out that we at the XRB don't set out who is required to report. This is instead set out in legislation for registered charities. This requirement is found in the Charities Act. But when legislation requires someone to report in accordance with generally accepted accounting practice, we issue the standards covering what information they have to report and how they have to present it. In a nutshell, registered charities use XRB standards to prepare their financial reports, which they file with Charity Services. Now, the standards themselves, what are the Tier 3 and Tier 4 standards? In New Zealand, the accounting standards which apply to registered charities are split into 4 tiers. Tier 1 and 2 charities use a full set of standards which are based on international standards. Tier 3 and 4 charities, on the other hand, use simple format reporting standards with one standard that applies to each tier. Tier 3 is an accrual-based standard, and it applies to registered charities with total operating expenses of less than $2 million per year. If you're familiar with accounting, this is the standard in which you will find a balance sheet. Tier 4 is a cash-based standard, and it's used by the smallest entities which have less than $125,000 in operating payments per year. Both of these standards are New Zealand specific. There is no international equivalent to them. They were written specifically for many of the smaller charities and also for the public sector entities that we have in New Zealand. This is just a bit of detail here to give you some information on what the differences are between the two standards. They mostly require the same sorts of things when a charity is preparing their performance report. They both have to prepare a statement of entity information. They both have to provide some non-financial information as their statement of service performance, some revenue or receipts and expenses or payments, some information on their assets, more in Tier 3 than in Tier 4. The main difference there is that Tier 4 entities aren't required to do a statement of cash flow or a separate statement of accounting policies. So what were our goals? What were we hoping to achieve when these standards were first written? The idea was to develop a set of standards that were simple and easy to apply, particularly by non-accountants, while at the same time providing information that promoted public trust and confidence in the charitable sector by having some accountability for the benefits that they enjoy by virtue of being a registered charity. And towards that goal, it was decided that what we needed for each of Tier 3 and Tier 4 was first a single standard to keep all of the requirements in one place, rather than spread out over multiple standards, as you get with the full suite in Tier 1 and Tier 2. That those individual standards needed to use less technical language, that they needed to keep the accounting requirements themselves as simple as possible, and that they should have a focus on the transactions that are common for Tier 3 and Tier 4 entities. So there was an assessment done at that stage about what we would expect Tier 3 and Tier 4 entities to be doing, and we wrote the standards based around that. We also knew at that time that we would need to support charities in implementing the standards because these were very new. And to do that, we also developed a set of application guidance and some optional reporting templates that are found as an Excel version. These templates were made available both through our website and through the Charity Services website. So if you have filed with them before, you are probably familiar with the template. And all of this came into effect from 2015. Given that 2015 was 5 years ago, now is a good time for us to review the standards and see how they're going in practice, which is exactly why we're here talking to you today. So the review itself, what is being covered by the review? This is a very broad scope review. So we are reviewing more or less everything that we produced that relates to the Tier 3 and Tier 4 standards. This means we're seeking feedback not only on the standards themselves, but also on the application guidance that sits alongside and the optional reporting templates. So any suggestions that people have in those domains as well will be very well received. So what do we want to know about them? And to put it simply, there are 3 things that we're looking for. We want you to tell us which parts of those 3 things are working well. What do you like? What do you find useful? What's not working well? Is there anything that you don't think is useful or that hasn't been done as well as it could have? And do you think there are things that are working well or not working well, but that could change depending on what needs more guidance? So you might think the requirement is okay, but it's just difficult to understand. And is there something that we could be doing to explain that better to charities? This is really just to give you guys a bit of an overview on how you can give us your feedback. Apart from talking to us today, we have created 3 different methods by which people can give us their feedback. If you want to do the quicker, easier version, we have an online survey that we've made available. We've also got a feedback form with very similar questions to the survey that you can complete by going to our website, or if you have a lot of comments you would like to provide to us, we are open to receiving full written submissions, and that is the ordinary way that we have been used to receiving them. But we knew that people may not have as much time or may not want to give as much detail on the Tier 3 and 4 standards, but a lot of people would have something they wanted to say, which is why we've developed these other 2 more easy methods of giving us feedback. And finally, just about the review, where can you find more information on it? You can find that through our website by going to xrb.govt.nz and going to the menu at the top of the page, and under the drop down you will find an option for the review where you can find a summary sheet and the full request for information if you would like to read that about what we are looking for. And that is actually more or less what I had planned to cover at this point. So I can pass over to Cherrie.
Kia ora. Thanks, Jamie. That's great, and really happy to see that XRB have thought of something more than just a formal submission and made the feedback form in the online survey as something much easier to do if people only have a small amount of comments to make. I think that's really great, and great to see government having an understanding and appreciation of time within the community sector, and that quick and sharp is really good. So really happy with that. So now we're going to shift over to Cherrie, and I will just share my screen again and add up her PowerPoint. And over to you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Cherrie Yang. I'm a senior lecturer in accounting at AUT, so Auckland University of Technology. So before becoming an academic, I was a charity accountant. So that's from where I developed research interests. So I did a master at AUT and then decide to go further to complete a PhD. So I finished in 2016 and then stayed at AUT to be a senior lecturer and teach accounting subjects, also including not-for-profit accounting and accountability. So today I'd like to share a couple of research of my own and also the wider not-for-profit research. Rochelle, if you don't mind to move to the next slide. Thank you. So the first point I'd like to highlight is the role of accounting. Accounting is very important. So of course, I appreciate not everyone is a trained accountant in the sector, and then we're trying to master the skill, whatever that is needed for this report, right? But at the very beginning, I do want to highlight accounting plays an important role, not only to give visibility to the resources, how much funding we receive, how we use it properly, also give us an opportunity to, tell our stories around the activities and achievements. So I think that's important. Right. And then with the new reporting standard requirements, it also allowed us to meet stakeholders' information needs or the users' information needs. So in the standards highlights, the resource providers who are the funders and, the service recipient, that's the beneficiaries. And it helps us to facilitate decision-making, help the users to make their decisions, whether they want to donate, to make their donation decision or volunteering decision. So that's all important for our charities, and it helps to discharge accountability. So accountability is a concept that is much wider and complex. So that's why I like to spend a little bit of time today to illustrate that concept a little bit more in here. So accountability, no matter how we define it, is more than accounting, right? So we said accounting is important, but accountability is much more than that. So in general, that's referred to, giving and demanding of reason for conduct. So yesterday in my class, I have a class at AUT called Not-for-Profit Accounting. And then one of my students gave a very good answer, I think, to describe what accountability is. So she said, well, that's being answerable, being answerable about our behavior, the things we love to do or we think is important, which I truly appreciate that interpretation. So in here, I put a picture of camellia. It's just to want to make the point that accountability is so subjective that it tend to change based on the context. So it depends on who we discharge accountability to, and then the way of this discharge accountability should change. So that's what this means in here. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So in our not-for-profit sector, very broadly, accountability can be includes two types of accountability. Of course, I know in the literature, there are a lot more ways that can be categorized. So in here, I only want to capture two. One is imposed accountability. So that's more aligned with what, the XRB's simple format reporting we talk about here, or that includes, what funders want. By giving the funding and in return, then you need to provide how you spend the funding and in their requirements, in their format, right? So that's why what I'm mentioned in here, so it's prescribed accounting, and that's imposed upon reporting requirement and procedure, and quite likely that results in accountability being compliant based. And of course, I appreciate that could raise, tensions or even resistance of providing reports to fulfill this imposed accountability. So that's why I think it's important to mention another way, and perhaps more close to our community-based charities, that will be felt accountability. So that is mainly driven by our intrinsic motivation. and deeper acceptance of the things we think are important and therefore we want to do, right? So then that is a feel of responsibility or answerability to give an account. And that can be discharged in so many different ways. It can be through Facebook. It's like our webinar today going to be put on the Facebook, put it live and make it available for whoever don't have time for this session, and then they can also watch it. And then also can be discharged through websites or even face-to-face, having a conversation with your client and then to understand their difficulty, their vulnerability. And then that's a way of discharging accountability as well. So in that sense, I want to just mention for these two types of accountability, they coexist. So we like or not, they just coexist. We need to fulfill both of them. But at the same time, we need to understand it is impossible we want to equally to discharge accountability to this type and to all stakeholders at an equal degree. So it's just impossible. So therefore, Rochelle, if you don't mind to move to the next slide. So I put a few ways just to bridge these two types of accountability, which I know there are a lot of tensions involved to, to fulfill the regulatory requirement. At the same time, you may think, well, we're time poor, we don't have a lot of time, we're very busy. So therefore, it's possible to align the imposed and the felt accountability. So the first, if I start with the list, to tell your story through, the statement of service performance. It's one of the requirements, no matter that's tier 3 or 4 charities. And then, so maybe what you are good at by telling, storytelling or other ways to discharge your felt accountability, include that. Tell your stories and put it in the statement service performance. I know it's have only a few places you can put that, outcome statement or output measures, and find a way, so to include how many participants, maybe you say today attend this session, and then what you have learned or what you may like to do further, and think about something maybe more related to your charities as well. Align with your goal, align with your mission, what you really touch your heart, and that's the felt accountability. And the second one would be develop a system. So that's something come out very strongly from my research is many charities don't really have a good system of recording and reporting their service performance information. And then when it's a time to report, they may really find they struggle, where can we find those information? I know there's a good group of people attend our session today, but how many of them I can't remember, so it's a really important to build a system of recording all relevant information, around your activities, around your achievement, collect, beneficiaries' testimony. They may say, oh, this is really great session. Thank you very much. And now I know what to do, so collect those statements that will help, right? So to tell your story, back to the first point. And then the third point is to measure your performance and impact. So as a registered charity or community-based organization, we want to make an impact. There must be something that you're trying to change. So then you need to measure that accordingly, right? I know this is really hard from my research as well. So outcome measurement, output measurement itself is already hard. And then it's being proved very challenging. And then here I'm trying to highlight there are more. There are impacts, maybe not only from one of the charities, maybe through collaboration of the sector or even with the government, with the private companies or corporate, and to collaborate together, we can make some impact. But then to measure that, no matter what you do, what activity you are undertaking, that is really important. That will help you to report your service, report your outcome and impact. And moving on, from our research, we also identified co-production to performance measurement with beneficiaries are quite helpful. because sometimes as an organization, we will develop some performance measures, and then we thought that is really good to measure the impact or measure the outcome, but it may not be appreciated very much by your beneficiaries. So because they have their goals, they have something they want to change. So it's important to make this performance measure more meaningful through co-producing those measures together with them. So just have a conversation with them and say, well, what are the goals you're trying to achieve this year? And then what kind of measure we may like to take to track your records and over the year whether your goal has been attained or not. And then the next point is being innovative in your reporting. I know we may get tracked of the template and say, well, this is template, I must follow the template. As accountants, that's something we really would do. But like last year, we have that charity reporting award, and then one of the key themes we have is innovation. So we're really glad to see there are more innovative reporting that start to appear in the sector. So I wrote a blog for charity service. If you search charity service website and the blog, you will find more information about how to be innovation and produce innovative reporting. And then it's also important to maintain a dialogue or building conversations with your key stakeholder. That includes charity regulator, charity services, and XRB. So they are being very willing to hear your feedback. So I often find that's amazing. In New Zealand, our standard setters and regulator being so approachable and then want to hearing our feedback. That's very unusual. So Jamie and Lisa may see my other research, through the XRB research form. So from the international practice, so New Zealand is actually doing something quite unique and being engaging with the sector and trying to hear the feedback and to improve for further improvement. And the next point is to utilize technology. I think what we learned from the COVID is, we can be connected, still connected through technology, like this Zoom meeting. And the other day, I think last week, I attended a session also through Zoom that's hosted by the University of Lancaster in the UK. So they start the meeting at their 8:45 UK time, and in our New Zealand 9:45 at night. And then so that's a whole day seminar. So I stayed until 1. I think that's enough for me. I need to go to bed. But that was so good. We have over 100 participants for that event all over the world, from the States, from people in the UK, New Zealand, and Australia. So I sometimes just feel it's amazing. We can save so much, flights costs and so many other costs, just can still connect with each other online. And social media, that's a powerful tool as well. I think we can utilize more. So I only list a couple of points that I think may be helpful, but there are definitely more. So I think that's something worth developing and have more conversations with. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cherrie. So it's really helpful, and I really like that idea of thinking about accountability as well as accounting. I think that's really useful to think that, to kind of step away from that feeling like something's imposed on us, to actually towards the value that actually this reporting provides, both to the organisation, but to the sector as a whole. Like this kind of depth of reporting back into charity services under these kind of reporting guidelines provide a level of not just accountability, but a level of something. And we've been working with charity services and talking with them more about the data that's produced out of this kind of reporting, and how valuable it can be, and what collectively and collaboratively we can do with it going forward. So thanks so much. That's really helpful. So we're going to give you a link to Cherrie's blog So we'll find that for you and get that up before the end of today, within the next half hour. So now it's really time to come across to you. So now I'm keen to hear from you about what's working with your current reporting, what's not working, and where are the gaps, or what do you think would be useful to change. So there's two ways you can do it. One is you can put it directly into the chat. And the other is you can, not many people have their cameras on, but you can raise your hand if you have your camera on, and I will allocate you. While we sort of warm up to that, I wanted to talk about the statement of service performance, Jamie. We last year, when we started to put together our reporting, we wanted to change the way that we'd previously done that. And I was really interested to see that you were talking about guidance notes, because somehow I missed that you even had those. So maybe we should also start like sharing that more with the group, so that people know where to go for that. And so I found it incredibly difficult, and I spent 2 or 3 months actually really trying to think about something, because it wasn't just about what could we measure now, but it was what could we measure over the next X amount of years, 2, 3, 5 years. And I found that really difficult. And I think the fact that there isn't any kind of format at this point in time quite difficult, because it's not like so I did actually look back on a number of our other partners and stakeholders and how they'd reported. But I found everybody was so inconsistent in what they were actually recording and reporting on, that it was really tough to kind of, that wasn't that helpful to see what other people were doing. It was useful for me, but really then I had to kind of go back, and we actually probably spent more time on that than we spent on just our general financial reporting, because we use Xero, so that part sort of produces itself really, and we work with our accountants to do that.
That's actually really good feedback, and thank you for that, Rochelle. We've heard from other people as well through this process that they have found it difficult to identify what it is that they should be reporting in their statements of service performance. When we were originally setting out these requirements, we were very cautious about trying to prescribe or give the impression that we were prescribing specific ways of reporting your service, because we knew that every charity was so different, and we wanted to give them the flexibility to be able to report what worked the best for them. But we have now heard that some people would like a little bit more in the way of suggestions of measures. So that is something that we will take away and consider.
Thanks. I think it would definitely be really helpful for tier 3 and tier 4 to have examples of, to start with kind of examples. These are the kind of measures that you could use. And then it could be a kind of cut and paste, as in these ones would suit us, but we couldn't use these ones. I think that would be a really helpful starting point. I think as well, because everyone's using it so differently, is that then it's not possible to collate all of that and report on that. And I know Charity Services have been in conversations with the sector about this as well, about how to make that easier, so that that could also be reported on, because it is obviously incredibly valuable information when we try to look sector-wide.
Yeah, and having, I can see how having just the financial data in the register, it only tells one part of the story, and possibly not even the most important part in some cases.
Absolutely. And I think as well, remembering that the tier 3 and tier 4 charities are generally very under-resourced. So a lot of them will have a sort of chief executive or general manager who might actually be doing, 5 jobs, and they're the ones that are doing this as well. Whereas the larger charities, will often have specialist staff that could be working on this specifically. So thanks for the link to your blog, Cherrie. Is there any other questions? Surely you've all got thoughts. Put up your hand if you've got something to say, or questions in the chat. How have you found the reporting? And it's fine if you want to say it's easy. And I think whichever way, I think XRB are keen to hear, like, I actually have no idea how it works.
Yes, please. If you think something's horrible, just tell us.
If it's
right
crap,
through
tell
to
us.
it's really great. All right, so Annette's provided some feedback regarding the cash flow report. Xero seemingly does not have this as a standard report. She came across the spreadsheet to calculate the figures. This is excellent and needs more promotion. It's true. I didn't know that they had a cash flow report either.
Annette, can I just double check? Is that the cash flow on the Charities Services website, or is that our standard template?
Annette, you can feel free to unmute yourself.
Talk to us or just put it in the chat, whatever.
Our template.
Oh, she can't unmute. Yep, yes, your template.
Oh, we always have that unmute problem too. That's fantastic. Thank you for that feedback.
Yay, sorry, I just got it to work.
Oh, good.
Having pushed it a few times. Yeah, I can't remember if it's on the XRB website or if it's on the Charities website, but there's a cash flow report that's a spreadsheet. And once I guess the feedback around that is you actually need to know a little bit about how to use Excel to understand how to work it. But anybody with a fairly rudimentary knowledge of how spreadsheets work can follow along, and it just produces the figures that you need to put into the cash flow report. But it was only because I did, I think, a Google search to locate something that I came across that, and it's really disappointing that Xero doesn't have it as a standard option.
Yes, I have heard that it can be difficult to get Xero to convert from an accrual system to a cash report.
Oh, the report that they produced just isn't compatible with the at all. So, but the spreadsheet's perfect.
Oh, that's good. We'll have to pass that on.
So I think this is a really useful thing as well about you actually advocating for the sector and conversation with Xero. You know, like if there's a way that they can make it easier for us.
It's a standard request. I put in a request when it first came out, and I follow that. You know, every time somebody else puts a post on, everybody else is put in comments about it. When is this coming? And it's just it's on the never. Not a priority for Xero.
Thanks, Annette. Other feedback? You all think it's fine, because that's where we'll be at.
Just a question about the scope of all of this feedback. Is the scope to include the audit and independent review aspects, or is that completely outside the scope of this review?
Yeah, I didn't mention that in my presentation. The audit and review requirements for registered charities are set within the Charities Act. So that will have to be dealt with as part of the Charities Act review, which I understand is still ongoing. And I don't know if there's anything to report in that space right now.
So Teresa has commented saying that she's in that position where she's doing all things, and the current status is their current status is under-resourced. However, she's committed to their trust and making it easier for the next successor. So she'd appreciate all that there is, and I think definitely the guidelines would be really awesome there. I'm just wondering, Lisa, if you could post a link to the guidelines in the chat while we're going forward. And then Kamal said, for very small charitable organisations, definitely the volume of work to fill in the performance statement report is very huge. Are you thinking about changing this at some stage?
That's exactly what we're seeking people's feedback on right now. If it's too much work, if you think there's too much there for your organisation, tell us what you think shouldn't be there or what isn't adding any value. We would love any feedback on ways to streamline the template if that's what you're using to make that a less onerous task for you.
So Kamal, is that are you a tier 4 organisation or are you a fully voluntary organisation? If you could just clarify for us, that would be great.
Well, definitely we're in the tier 4.
That's a lot of...
Sorry, actually, we're in the tier 4, and it's completely voluntary organizations. I think there is some problem. Well, because I'm using both laptop and my mobile, that's why it's disturbing. The thing actually now, I'm working for, basically it's a 100% volunteer organization, like volunteer works, and also, well, definitely actually I'm in stage, and I'm in type 4 level, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's really helpful. I think particularly those fully voluntary organisations at tier 4 level, specifically where they just might have a little bit of income that's coming in. I know some of them are as low as 10,000 or 5,000, and it's just paying some of the kind of costs, the travel costs or voluntary costs. So I think therefore having a sort of larger reporting standard can be quite a load. So thanks, Jen. Jen's mentioning, sorry, I'll just put a few more notes on. Jen's mentioning that they're in their first year of operation, so she's very keen to get the templates and the guidance and to help them keep their accounting costs down.
That's right, thank you.
Thanks, Kamal. So
the templates and the guidance, are you not finding the ones that are currently there? Is that what your comment is, that it's not accessible?
I suspect that people are saying, like me, that they didn't even know that they existed.
Yeah.
So it would be great to have more visibility around that. And that's also something that we can share. So I'll get the links off you, and then we can add that up to our social media channels for Huia, and people can refer to them there.
And that is something, I guess, for us to take away, that we do need to continue to promote these resources and that they're available, because there are always new charities being registered every year. And most of those will be in that tier 3 and tier 4 space for a while.
I think as well, starting to promote this at the various kind of times that people are having year end as well, whether it's 31 March or 30 June or 31 December. There's kind of those core end of year financial years that charities are choosing. So promoting it particularly around those times, I think, would be useful. So Vulcan saying they're aware that there is often a high level of turnover with nonprofits, both with board and staff. So they fully endorse the need for more awareness raising around these things. I think the other question I have, Jamie, is if people then start to look at the guidelines and templates, they can also provide feedback on that, right? Okay, great. Okay, so Annette has another question. How many charities waste money having an accountant because they don't feel comfortable producing the reports themselves? Is this a sort of feedback being sought as well?
Lisa, I think you may be better to answer this question. We can't hear you. No. Looks like it's not coming through. I think a headset might be off or something. Well, I mean, I'll give it a crack. There are a number of charities that hire accountants to produce their reports. I'm not confident to say that that's something that was ever intended that they would have to do that. When we wrote the standards, we specifically wrote them with not needing an accountant in mind. I mean, it's difficult to make any sort of call about whether or not hiring an accountant is a waste of money. But if you find that the template is not generally, well, the standard is not generally accessible, and that it's requiring you to have an accountant, that is certainly feedback that we want to hear.
I think certainly as well that you know, if you're not using something like Xero or Mind Your Own Business and have a subscription to that, it can be a lot more complicated, and you feel that you need to do a lot more work, whereas a lot of those new automated technologies, I think, make a difference. The other thing I see often in nonprofits is a kind of historical role of having a kind of accounts person sitting in your organization. That can be often the most expensive way to do the work that you're doing, especially for small charities that only have a small kind of run of work. So there are organisations, for example, we use Beanie. We pay a set price per month for 12 months, and that works really well. And then we also have a subscription to Xero, so we're able to produce a lot of this content automatically online. So Sue's saying that she thinks the T4 report could be simplified. She prepared a report for a T4 charity that only had 6 transactions for the whole year, but the report ran to 12 pages. Wow, that's a lot. And Annette's agreed. So too much for tier 4, obviously.
Yeah, that is the impression you can get when you look at the template. The template was designed to capture all the possible things that you could have to report within each tier. If you go through the template and you remove the parts that are optional and the things that are irrelevant, you can often get these reports down to around 2 to 3 pages. But I understand that takes a certain amount of knowledge of Excel to know how to do it, and you might not feel like you can delete it. That's something that I've heard. People feel like the optional parts are not really optional because they're there, so they have to complete them.
So maybe there could be a simplified template for very small charities that takes all that out. So if you just want the base template, that you could have that.
Oh, kia ora. I'll just feed in. So because
Sure.
everyone's talking around, so thank you. Ko Teresa Hart toki ngoa no Tito Tokarau, so from the far north. And so for me, the interest is to invest in these engagements, because I think there's been a silo of practice, like a cultural practice, that we must do it this way and this way and this way. So perhaps with my background, perhaps what I'm identifying first time in this role is all their historical behaviour in that we had to have an accountant, had to be audited, and then we had to pay all this amount of money. And so by doing that, we need to go skill-based to reduce that and have voluntary input in the skills that weren't there. So it's a give and take. That's what I'm saying. Whilst it could be simplified, I also tautoko awhi that we learn more ourselves and invest in understanding what we need to gravitate to as well, because we're quite capable. So more around the workshops and development and training and building relationships. So reading the blogs and things and just having those links, it's just like light bulbs for us up here in the far north. Sometimes, so I just wanted to add to, yes, while it could be easier and easier, we're also in positions to achieve and gravitate. So, but just having those supports to wrap around to help while we're there. So some of the things that I got stuck in, and because our deed will change, it's moving into more of the rongoa wellbeing post-COVID. So I think there's more changes coming from our charitable practices as well now to what we traditionally did. And we've got to look at being innovative and how do we share that journey or navigate that journey in the transition on the document. So I just need more help around that because we're quite visual people, and that it is relatable and that anybody can actually pick up that document. That's where I struggle. So we've got different tiers of understanding that as well. So I just wanted to, if we're at a tier 4 and used to the costing with our accountant, well, actually we had to question our accountant too, because they were used to historically doing something 12 years, that was easier to do what they were doing than to adjust what needed to be done. So I just wanted to feed that back as well, that it works both ways. Sorry, guys.
No, that's really very helpful. I'm just trying to think about what we can do in that space. There's a lot of different options. I mean, there was one point that you made in there, and I might have missed some of it, about the journey of the report. Could you just repeat that part of it for me?
Yeah, sure. So, so our accountant, or the trust accountant at that time, only related to previous practices. So our actual accountant that we invested in didn't have a buy-in to actually the structure of what the trust was doing. It just picked up historical things, and that became the simplicity of doing that. And so for me, the investment wasn't just paying that capped value, it was actually needing them to buy in to advise us better. So we had to go and scope and look at that, and that only came back when we had to get audited. So yeah, I am questioning why I have to pay a 4,000 plus auditing report, but we had to go and find so much more information to actually reflect what we were doing, even though so the confusion was that we were told to do it this way, but my inquiry back was, but that's not what we're doing, this is who we are. And then we're getting the feedback, but you'll get this through. And I went, but that's not tika and pono, that's not who we are. So even our advice, so I might be a one-off, I might be just that one person, but I'm thinking when you're in those lower tiers, and the roles that I also am in, I would encourage people to inquire when the accountant's coming back with this and this and this as well. We're not about tick boxes, we're about making sure that pūrākau, that story, that navigation of what we've done is received and understood by all levels.
And that, I mean, to me, it sounds like you've actually hit on the idea of what the reporting standards should be. They are a vehicle through which you can tell the story of who you are and what you do. It's not meant to be something that an accountant comes in and goes, oh, no, you just report this, 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 and this, and then file it away. It's got to make sense to you. And you have to, it has to be something that you can draw value from, because it helps you guide what you do in the future as well. So I think and I don't think it's probably only happened to you. I think it's something that I've heard a few times in different places around the country.
Thanks, Jamie, because I just want to encourage others to be like that, because since that date, we now have Ministry of Health contracts, because we've stood strong in the po of who we are. And so we're not just, and so we're qualifying more because we're inquiring in the back office, or we're producing guidelines. So I really appreciate guidelines. I'd love to sit into more and understand more, because it also helps where we're positioned, and particularly having these hois online, it supports when sometimes you're like, oh really, should I just conform to today? But but we cannot, because we've got so much more to do and so much further to go. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. And I think you raised a good point that there are cultural nuances in terms of how people actually run their organisations, and being told, and we see this across other charities where there's a general respect to follow what the rules are. So, but if there's simplified rules, like you don't necessarily need an accountant or a lawyer to register your charity, or you don't necessarily need an accountant if you're at a smaller amount, or you don't have to be audited if you're earning under 500k. I think these kind of options would be really useful. Maybe some case studies or stories from smaller charities actually talking about how they do their reporting, I think would be really useful. So Charles, sorry, I understand you've had your hand up. I missed it.
Okay, thanks. No, kei te pai. So kia ora tātou, my name's Charlie and I work at the Department of Internal Affairs in the Hapai Hapori group. So we are the community advisors and administer a lot of funding and lotteries and COGs. I'm not sure if there are any other people in this webinar who are from a funder's perspective, but I guess I just wanted to put forward my perspective on this. So just that we find, I mean, when we're reviewing funding applications, we're always looking at these financial accounts, and so just to reassure the community organizations of the value and importance of those financial accounts for a funder, but also the statement of performance. So I think that is really valuable, and I'd again just reiterate that I as a person who reviews funding applications, I do look at that stuff. Just to reiterate the point that that accounting and accountability is not just about the finances. I think the one point that kind of came up, which I'd be quite interested to further explore, obviously we don't have time for this now, but I think there's a really neat opportunity around that statement of service performance to think about how that links in with an organisation's broader evaluation and monitoring, because I think this is an area in the sector that we do struggle a bit with. A lot of organisations are smaller organisations and don't necessarily have the capability or capacity and often times to do really sound and solid evaluation and monitoring. I guess trying to avoid duplication, trying to think about how you might be able to use your statement of service performance as a way of incorporating that into your organisation's annual evaluation. Just it does have value. So thanks a lot.
Kia ora, thanks, Charles. And yes, we used it in our annual report. We got a kind of infographic, which was kind of a lot of bubbles, really, just demonstrating, you know, in a practical way, like these are the things that we delivered. So we did actually then use it in our annual report. So there's just one final question before we close up. So Annette said that audit and reviewers definitely have an impact on reporting. As Teresa also pointed out, there's sometimes contradictory advice. Are you also working with them on this review and seeking their feedback?
With the auditors and reviewers? Yes, yeah, we are talking to them and talking about the issues that they're seeing and the difficulties that they are encountering as well. Because we don't want people to end up with two different groups of people telling them two different things about what they should report based on what's auditable and what's not. Yeah, no, we are.
And just the final point that Sue's had, so the last question is around charities having to prepare dual reports, so financial reports and then a separate one for funders to meet their criteria. So it would be great to have better alignment between what funders need and what charity services need and the financial and accountability reporting that's needed. I think it would be really helpful to work with funders and get better alignment there, because as always, when you go to write a funding application or report on a funding application, it doesn't actually match where you might have reported that same project or something somewhere else. So just to finish up, I'm going to do a karakia mutanga, but a reminder that if you do have an extra half an hour, you're welcome to stay online, and then we will match people, and you'll just have a bit of a chat and get to meet some of your peers, because that's not a very common thing that we even have time to do that. So I'm just going to get to my right screen and just finish up here. So thanks so much for joining, and thanks very much as well, particularly to Jamie and Cherrie today to helping participate and lead the conversations. I don't know if I'm actually on main screen. Right. Unahia, unahia, unahia ke te uru tapanui, ki a wātea, ki mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, i te ara te paka. Koe rā i roto, whakairea ake ke runga, kia tēnā, tēnā, huie tākie. Stop sharing. So kia ora everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. Really great to have you on board, and appreciate you making the time to provide this feedback. As mentioned, Jamie will bring this up into the review that's underway, and of course you're still welcome to provide feedback via the survey, the feedback form, or a greater submission if you'd like. So thanks very much, and those who want to stay on, we'll say goodbye, and those who want to stay in, feel free to stay on now. Kia ora, everyone.
Thank you, Russell, and everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Kia ora.
I think I'm really